Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I am glad you're here. Welcome to the 2025 RAA Leaders Conference. We are thrilled to have you all back here with us. We're going to have a lot of fun this week. We're going to have a lot of important conversations and learn a little bit along the way, as we always do. But before we begin, I would like to take a moment to reflect and remember those affected by the tragic accident in January at DCA when a military helicopter collided with a regional jet. We honor the lives lost, and we recognize the team members, many of whom are here, who comforted families during that difficult time in the midst of their own grief. And those of you in this community who reached out and supported them. It shows us that even in moments of tragedy, the regional airline community as a family comes together, and our commitment to safety is equaled only by our commitment to one another. But most of all, let's pause for a moment of silence to honor those whose lives were lost. Thank you. Over the past year, our industry has seen significant challenges and opportunities. We've navigated the complexities of pilot training and workforce development. We're still addressing an ongoing pilot shortage, and we've advocated for the modernization of our air traffic control systems. And those efforts weren't just about responding to our current needs, but about building a future where regional aviation can survive and thrive again, and connect small communities of all sizes across the nation. And as we gather today, we're celebrating a really important milestone, which is our 50th anniversary. RAA, or as it was known back then, the Commuter Airline Association of America, was incorporated on September 26, 1975. Since then, RAA has been a steadfast advocate for regional aviation, championing safety, small community air service, and operational excellence. And this anniversary is a testament to the dedication that all of you in this room have shown along the way. One of the ways that we are marking this special occasion is the publication of the RAA Annual Report. We have representatives from our design firm, Tipos Libres, who will be here today, and I want to thank each of them for their beautiful work. And we invite you to explore our annual report. That's available at raa.org, and it's also available on the app. We also invite you to stop by and check out the RAA Museum. That's in the foyer area, where we have a selection of photos and artifacts from our history. We don't have 50 rooms for 50 years, so we've only really been able to hit the highlights, but we have some really neat stuff there, and we know that the real history is going to be in the stories that we tell this week. We have a great program ahead with a focus on ATC modernization, continued efforts to focus on a safe and strong regional airline workforce, business trends, and fleet. We'll celebrate 50 years with a special happy hour tonight, and that's open to all attendees, and it'll be followed by a gala dinner, which is a ticketed event afterwards. Limited seats are still available. The attire is cocktail, but the most important thing about tonight is going to be family and friendship. So if you show up in your business attire, we won't throw you out. I want to take a moment to thank every sponsor and to express my sincere gratitude. Every sponsor helps us to bring this conference together. And I want to make special recognition of some of our key sponsors, starting with our diamond level sponsor and longtime friends at MHI RJA. Thank you. And I'd like to convey our sincere thanks to the following 50 years milestone sponsors. Your incredible generosity has given us a head start on the next 50 years. And I want to thank ATR, Electra Aero, and Embraer. I also want to recognize our immediate past chairman, Chip Childs, whose phenomenal tenure as chair over the past 2 years has really helped us chart important progress, in particular as we dealt with ATC modernization. And I'd like to recognize and thank our newly elected chair, Tim Cobrick, who represents the crucial regional cargo sector. That's a part of the industry that's so critical. We've got a panel dedicated to it later in our program. So thank you, Chip, and congratulations, Tim. And I want to recognize and thank a special guest in our audience, Montserrat Betterja, who is Director General of the European Regions Airline Association. We have a very strong friendship across the Atlantic, and I get to attend her events all the time, and I think this is your first here with us. So thanks for being here, Monse, and more importantly, thank you for your friendship. And most importantly, thank you all for being here today. This is fantastic. It's going to be a great week, and we're going to go right into our first panel, and I have the privilege of moderating that panel. It's entitled Advancing Air Traffic Control Reform, Navigating the Path to a Modernized System. This discussion is so vital, has been made very clear by events this year. But it's not just about ensuring that today's system is safe and efficient, but making sure that the system can scale up and be safe and efficient in the future with so many new entrants coming in. I'll be joined by an esteemed group of leaders from across the regional AV industry, and I'd like them to join me on stage right now, and I will introduce them as they're being seated. Rick Kofling, President and CEO of Commute Air. With over 30 years of experience, Rick has led Commute Air through significant operational transitions, including expanding maintenance and crew bases and integrating the ERJ-145XR operations under United Airlines' United Next strategy. Jason Berry, President of Horizon Air. 28-year industry veteran, Jason oversees Horizon's operations and has recently been an executive within the Alaska Air Group. He brings a wealth of experience in both passenger and air cargo operations. Timothy Wong, President and CEO of Endeavor Air. Timothy joined Endeavor in June 2025, bringing over 20 years of business and legal experience. Prior to Endeavor, he served as Managing Director at Delta Airlines, overseeing the operational and commercial teams for Delta Connection. Chip Childs, President and CEO of SkyWest Inc. Chip's been with SkyWest since 2001 and served as CEO since 2016. Under his leadership, SkyWest has grown considerably and is known for its operational efficiency and partnerships. He also previously served as the chair of the FAA's Next Gen Advisory Committee. And David Grizzle, Chief Executive Officer of Republic Airways. David brings a wealth of experience from his time as Chief Operating Officer at the FAA and Senior Vice President at Continental Airlines. He's recently taken the helm at Republic Airways, focusing on innovation and operational excellence. So each of these leaders brings a unique perspective to the conversation, so please join me in welcoming them. Can we get full and audible for the podium? All right, well, thanks everybody, and thanks for joining us on this important conversation on air traffic control. We just had a board meeting and we talked about this exhaustively. It is emerging as one of the most important and critical issues that we're dealing both with a safety and an efficiency of the system focus. And it's pretty well known that there are disruptions across the system, but I think what's less well known is that when those disruptions happen, and capacity is brought down to ensure safety, a lot of that capacity is being extracted from regional markets. So this is an issue that is important to all users and has a significant and unique impact on regionals. Additionally, we operate at 94% of the nation's commercially served airports. No other industry sector covers that much ground, and no other industry sector is that uniquely exposed to the issues that we have at airports large and small. So I'm going to start just from all the panelists briefly to set the stage from where you sit. What is the biggest ATC challenge in reform and that reform should be solving for your passengers? And I will start with Timothy.
Sure. Thanks, Faye, and thanks for convening this group to talk about this important topic. All of us are here because we believe in the significance and importance of serving the regional communities that we fly from. And what we've seen over the years is, as Faye said very appropriately, we've had to make this trade-off between safety and efficiency. And that's not what our customers expect. I'll give you a very simple analogy. If you think about over the last 3 to 4 decades, if you were to look at our actual flight time, so gate to gate, you're flying particularly into New York, and New York weighs heavy on our mind because we fly about 40% of our fleet into and out of the New York City area. Those times have gotten longer. Customers have a reaction to that, rightfully so, because if you think about all other aspects of their lives, they've gotten faster. That's progress, right? You can order on an app, you can, the internet, everything is faster except for air travel. It's not the equipment, it's not the aircraft, we know that. It's congestion, it's ATC, it's understaffing, it's equipage at ATC. So we need to find a way to break out of that trade-off. When faced with safety versus speed, we're always going to choose safety. There's no question about that, as we should. Let's get to a world where we can have the and. We can have the safety and the efficiency that our customers expect.
Well said, Timothy. What are your experiences, Jason?
I mean, I think what Timothy said is spot on. Safety, that's table stakes. That is never going to be compromised. But we do need to be more efficient. There is a challenge, and we need to be innovative as well. And I think there's an opportunity here to not just keep doing the same thing. This is a chance for us to re-envision how we do this and be industry leaders globally and find better ways to operate in the airspace together.
And Chip, you've been deeply involved. You were the chair of Next Gen. Where has that delivered, and where has that fallen short?
Well, I think it's a great topic for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's certainly 2025, the topic is congestion and extraordinarily busy airports like the Northeast and DC. And from our perspective, we fly a lot out west where the skies are more open, but there's equal challenges in those scenarios as well. And being on the Next Gen Advisory Committee, I think the frustrating part is, particularly today, there's so much technology existing today, as well as technology that's coming, and being able to execute on that technology is probably the biggest challenge. It takes money. I think that we're in a good position. I mean, most of the time on Next Gen, when we take a look at regional equipage, mainline equipage, and FAA equipage, money is the number one thing that you look at that has to coincide with everybody's interest. So it's a difficult conversation, but I am very optimistic with the Secretary of Transportation, Duffy today, as well as Bedford, being able to take these technologies that we have today, as well as some that are coming, and being able to execute on the entire industry, being able to be on the same page. Hopefully moving forward, because there's some tremendous opportunities that not only you don't have to face so much of a trade-off between safety and efficiencies, a lot of the technologies solve both. And that's what we got to get to as soon as we can.
So we're getting that and.
Yep.
Yeah, very well. I'm going to go across to Rick Hofling, and I alluded to in my opening remarks, when capacity is drawn down for safety, as it should be, regional flights are the first to be extracted. We know that Newark is notorious for delays. From your experience, how much of that is ATC structure versus staffing?
It's all of the above. And first, thank you for having me on the panel. It's great to see all the faces out here today. You know, we talk about moving at the speed of safe, but safe and efficiency sometimes collide, and we shouldn't be. There's lots of things we can do. We talked about modernization of the ATC and technology systems there. It's also a lot of bureaucracy that needs to change. And I, too, share, Chip, and I think all of our opinion here, that we're very encouraged by what we hear from Secretary Duffy and Administrator Bedford on the changes they want to impose within the organization to get that thing operating at a much more efficient pace. Moving at the speed of safe, we also can move with efficient speed as well. But all those things have to come together. With regard to Newark specifically, I did, for those that aren't aware, I spent the majority of my career there, Managing Director of Operations for Continental United. We spent a lot of time on slot management and slot control. At one point in time, we actually self-slotted the airport using a thing we called Project Total. Took everybody's flight activity, and we just chopped the peaks by managing ours out, which hurt Continental and United at the time, because we're spreading our revenue outside the peaks, and that was a challenge for us. I think the biggest challenge I see is, we're very encouraged by the bill, the $12 billion, but that has to be appropriated every year. And that means that Congress has to come together every year to make sure that that money is being spent and spent efficiently. targets have to be met. You know, the challenges that we've faced have been decades long, and it's going to take a while to fix it. But there are a lot of encouraging things here that are happening. We should be all behind Secretary Duffy and Administrator Bedford as we go down this path together.
It was very heartening to see the seriousness, I think, and the focused attention that's happening. David, you look like you were about to say something.
No, I'm waiting.
You're waiting patiently. Well, you know, and it turned to you because of your capacity of having served as the COO at the FAA, and now you're at an airline and you have a lot of operations at DCA. The reality is there have been a lot of close proximity events at DCA and nationwide. Are the mitigations that we have in place today, are they not? Are they working? Are there more adjustments that need to be made?
The ones that we put in place are definitely an improvement, and more need to be made. I was talking to my partner, Matt Koskell, before this began, and I remarked how that I'm still considered an ATC expert, even though I last headed up air traffic control a decade ago, 12 years ago, in fact. And he said, nothing's changed. And that is substantially true. That is substantially true, that the systems that we were working on 12 years ago are still substantially incomplete at this point. And the procedures that we are utilizing today are substantially the same procedures we were utilizing 12 years ago. The DCA event, tragic event, reflects the historical unwillingness on the part of the Pentagon to collaborate. They do not see collaboration as one of their responsibilities. And we see it in multiple areas. Use is just one of the areas in which they do not collaborate. Now, I have to say, Secretary Duffy is the most engaged Secretary of Transportation in aviation that we have had. I've been in the business for 43 years. There has never been a Secretary of Transportation who is more engaged than Sean Duffy is right now. He has used some of his energy to work with Secretary Nexon, and the changes that have been made would never have occurred, even with the crash, had Secretary Duffy not energetically grabbed the exits by the little lapels and said, we've got to do some changes here. We've got to make some changes here. And so the future improvement will depend on whether there is actually a cultural change within the Pentagon that convinces them that they need, in fact, to be good collaborators. I mean, many of their airplanes still don't have ADS-B in them. And so we'll never be able to get to best equipped, best served when you've got hundreds of military aircraft that are not equipped. And that's a part of their reluctance to be fully collaborative with what is going on in the civil airspace.
So are you optimistic that that's something that we're going to be able to break through that cultural block?
I think we will have marginal improvements. People have to realize that in the civilian part of the federal government, unlike all of our companies, success is optional. And that influences everything they do. And so I believe that under Secretary Duffy and Administrator Bedford, we will have significant improvement. But will things be fixed 3.5 years from now? Absolutely not.
Well, we can make incremental changes, right? So there are some things that we can do early on, I think.
We can, but incremental change does not come easily with the federal government. They like to do things in big bursts every 15 years.
That's a fair point. I'm going to turn down to Jason because in the Pacific Northwest you have some unique constraints. You've got terrain and weather, and how are the ATC tools working for you there?
I think when you say it, they're not actually not what tools is what I would say.
Okay.
And I think that's the challenge we have. In almost 30 airports where we operate, and just in the Pacific Northwest, not only do we have terrain and the challenges there, we also have the forestry service tankers and firefighting going on this summer, the busy GA activity with all the aviation schools. We don't have even good basic situational awareness. That's a huge challenge. We have 10 airports that are third parties in Serco. We work with them closely, but they don't have the right tools that they need to just do basic situational navigation support. And I think that's a big area for us that we're concerned and really optimistic with the modernization. Is we need to have equity, and we need all airports to be recognized and supported as we go forward. Because there are areas where we may not have the density of activity as some of the Northeast, but believe me, the activity in many of these small airports has tripled over the last few years. And I don't think we're looking at this at a risk-based. It's really using risk-based ranking to identify where should we put these assets and prioritize based on not just activity alone, but what is the risk?
And I think that risk-based may be part of the cultural discussion that we need to have both with the FAA and with Congress.
We have to be honest in setting expectations. I mean, the FAA, they truly want to do better. But is Newark going to be different next summer from what it was this last summer? No, it's not. And the FAA needs to manage people's expectations in that regard.
So Jason, you raised a good point, and we try to make the point as loud and often as we can, which is that in a lot of small communities, modernization really means just doing the basics. So these are communities that lack radar, radio, ADS being in the tower. Now the RFS that we saw does have some surface awareness initiatives, so there is a focus on small communities. But my question is that enough? What's really needed to bring those small communities and take a look at the risk that exists there and make sure that that's managed as well as possible? And I'll open the question to all of the panel. I know you have some.
I have thoughts. I first and foremost, I want to back up, because I think when you talk about modernization, the first thing we go to is technology. In my view, modernization means you're evaluating the risk and you're evolving and adapting to solutions that are going to enhance safety. That doesn't necessarily mean technology, particularly in small airports. Sometimes it's just the way we're doing business. David brought it up very great with the military. We have other challenges out west. Jason is in the same spot. We have almost 60 airports that don't have a tower. So we spend a lot of our time talking about modernizing these towers. Well, we got a lot of airports. Since COVID, out in the west, everybody moved out of the big cities and they're moved into these small cities, and the demand is outstanding. We love it. It's fun. But there's a different level of operation in these smaller airports than there ever has been. So to a certain extent, like in our hometown of St. George, we're now putting up a tower there, but it's not necessarily, that may not fix everything. What we could do is reevaluate the rules and regulations that have been in place for 50 years and say, maybe we should put some transponders on some, personal aircraft. Maybe we make them communicate, because they don't have to today. This is what I call modernization without a dollar. Without one dime spent, we can do some things relative to how we operate, and it's going to take some collaboration with other organizations. We're now flying a 175 into Aspen, Colorado. Sounds crazy. It's awesome. Technology has enabled us to do it. But in Aspen, we bring in 80% of the passengers that come into Aspen, but are only 20% of the flights. So we have all the private aircraft that has some levels of priority over the commercial aircraft. That's a safety issue, and it's an efficiency issue that we just have to reevaluate what's on the table without having to go back to Congress and ask for billions of dollars. So I might be slightly more optimistic than what David is about some of this stuff and some of the organizations, but you have to do it in the narrative about making it more safe. Because there's some stuff that's just sitting right in front of us that we could do some things in. And it's Washington, D.C. You'll have some political interests that may not, be entirely aligned, but we have to punch through that stuff. And again, I know this is a big Sean and Brian endorsement, but if we have anybody that's going to be able and be willing to do it, I think we have the people in place to do that.
Yeah, and I think, again, they can get back to that cultural, one of the things that Administrator Bedford, well known, of course, in our community, said during his confirmation hearing is that the FAA has a trust problem, and it needs to re-earn the trust of Congress and the flying public. And I think if he can deliver on that, he might go a long way toward getting us part of the way there. I may come back to you, David, because the RFS, and I know you've read it, both the long version and the shorter one.
Oh, yes.
It does have some incremental improvements, and we've talked about how it has done two things and prioritized two things, which is sort of the most urgent need, communications and surveillance. What else is in there do you think is we really want to highlight and make sure is well understood and supported?
The RFS, which had a response date of last week, an initial response date of last week, really follows through on the original plan that Secretary Duffy put out back in May when he had his big presser with all, you were there, when he had all the ancient equipment and so forth. And it does take a risk-based approach to prioritization. So as Faye said, the top two items are communication and surveillance, because it's the outdated communication system that was causing all of the lapses at Newark. And I think very wisely, they brought the Verizon contract into the RFS so that they will have some early wins. But that contract's already let, it's ongoing, so they will have some early wins there. But they also have put radar up as the second highest priority. But in addition, they follow through and bring to completion some programs that will be very helpful and efficiency producing that have been in the works for over a decade. Principally among that is TFDM, Terminal Flight Data Management. Flight strips is what you might think of. And they're going to bring that to conclusion. And then they have the EADS system, which is really just a completion of an information assembly system that has been, again, been on the books for 20 years at this point. But by prioritizing those things, they will, in fact, begin to address our biggest risks and our most easily accessible opportunities for efficiency. And then I'll come back and mention service awareness. They are going to be expanding sort of the ASDX type of system in the bigger airports, but most importantly, they are really going to roll out the Surface Awareness Initiative. Again, there's been a lot of resistance within the FAA to the promulgation of that because it doesn't have the notification feature that they would like to have, but it increases situational awareness tremendously, and so I think it's a real benefit to the whole community that they're being so aggressive with that. I think that is actually one of the things that they will substantially complete this administration.
What do you think, Chip?
Well, I think I'm extremely optimistic about some of the things, and I don't think it's necessarily because of where we've been, but I think that when you couple all the things that we have available to us, that we can make a real significant difference. It's not going to take, the problem is it's not going to take just this administration, it's not going to take the current Secretary of Transportation and the current administrator. I think it's going to take more than that. It's going to have to take a consistent way of doing that. From my perspective, I think that besides having to go back every single year, having to ask for more money to do different things, in my view, I think that you have to have a program somehow in place that's going to take care of everybody relative to the transportation system from a funding and perspective, so you can consistently make these changes, both with the political relationships of everybody involved, but mostly due to money. And America is not in a great place, with money right now. And maybe we will be, but I think but whatever the larger scale stuff that we've done in the past is definitely, if we keep doing that, then I'm very, very pessimistic, but I hope that we can do some different things that's going to make some people say, okay, here's what we need to do, here's the money. And self-interest has got to take a little bit more of a sidestep to what safety really is, and the technology can do both safety and efficiency. So,
I'm going to turn to technology a little bit, because with close proximity events are happening at airports of all sizes. And what does that say about the limits of the current technology? What are the technological investments that are needed? And I'll start at the end of the panel.
Yeah, I think what we're hearing among our conversation yesterday, but also I think really was brought to the forefront already in this conversation this morning, is that it means different things in different airports in different parts of the country. I was struck listening to Jason and Chip talk about the challenges they face out west. Endeavor flies primarily the eastern half of the country, so east of the Mississippi, and our problems are radically different, and the challenges are radically different. And I think one of the things that is coming to the forefront here is, and you've heard whispers of this, $12.5 billion committed as an investment is a great down payment. But it's a down payment. It's not going to fulfill the mission in a country, in an airspace as large and as diverse as ours is. We hear about 60 airports, which frankly is a little bit news to me, without communication, or without towers, right? We know that some transponders are turned off. There isn't staffing for that. Those aren't the challenges we face. The challenges we face are congested airspace, perhaps an overreaction on implementing programs and stops because of understaffing, chronic understaffing, right? Again, that trade-off between safety and efficiency that you've heard so much about. So I think the challenge actually is sustainment of that investment that you already heard from Chip and from David, but also with that first down payment we've got, I think do what all of us do every day as leaders of our companies, which is ruthless prioritization based on ROI. What's going to give us the quickest hit, the biggest hit for the traveling public, so we can see those results? And I think it's gonna be difficult. There's no question. How do you rank a Western smaller community that doesn't have a tower versus New York and maybe investing more in staffing there? I think someone's got to take that bull by the horns and figure it out. We can certainly supplement that. I'm really excited that Faye and the RAA have taken up that mantle. So I think when we circle back to safety, though, I think it just means different things. And I think all of you have heard this. You're in the industry, you live this, which is safety is never a single stopgap. It's never a single technology. It's never a single process. The reason we have the safest airspace in the world, more than envy of aviation worldwide, is because we have adopted, and I think have done very well on the layering of protection. It's technology plus process plus people plus professionalism plus equipment, right? It's all of it together that creates those layers so that we have redundancy. And so if one were to fail, which sometimes happens, if weather were to turn a certain way, you've got other protections and backstops. So that's what we have to focus on.
So you referenced that it's not just technology, but obviously the other elephant in the room is staffing. And the FAA and its ATC is chronically understaffed. Now, they've made some progress, and they have started some initiatives, but we know that's going to take a while to bear out. Let's talk a little bit about how the staffing shortages have impacted, and let's start with the contextualize for those in the audience and beyond, what it really does mean to regional connectivity when those disruptions do start to take place.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see this, and ironically, and I agree with Tim. I mean, the needs of all 5 of us up here, given where we fly, are entirely different from a technological perspective. I mean, I don't, when we talk about R&P and Datacom and all the other stuff, I'm going into a non-tower airport. I just want people to talk to me, you know? So from that perspective, the needs are all over the place, which is extraordinarily expensive, which sometimes best equipped, best served is probably the way to do it. If you're going to fly in that city, then you got to work with your partner and get the right technology in place and that type of stuff. But back to the other, you know, honestly, back to this other point from the perspective of where we are when it comes time, you know, to prioritize exactly what Tim said, is we deal in an SMS world all the time, where we're taking data and evaluating what our risk, you know, factors are. And when we look at those risk factors, we take priority, like what Tim said, we take the most important ones and we see where that risk is. I think that, and I think Brian will do a better job of this than what we've seen in the past, but I think Brian is in a position to have the FAA do the exact same thing as opposed to listen to who is squeaking the loudest. When you take a look at the data and you share our SMS data with them, and you see the things that we see relative to this, I think that it's an important part of you know, evaluating where those risk spots are. Relative to staffing, you wouldn't think that Las Vegas would have a staffing shortage because it's, you know, it's a smaller airport. You'd think that everyone's worried about out west, San Francisco, as well as LA, and we see those shortages. But if the wind changes in Las Vegas and they're short-staffed, then it's the first smallest airplanes that start to get diverted, the ones that start to get slowed down. So we're kind of the fleet that does take the biggest hit because we're coming to shorter distances and we have some more flexibility. And it's a larger hit for us when we have that staffing shortage than anywhere else. Plus, all the small cities that we fly in and out of are usually having to communicate with a larger center to try to come in and out of those airports. So from a staffing perspective, we really do bear a lot of the brunt because we're in areas that don't have the same concerns as the Northeast. But it's also relative to what the type of flying, the size of aircraft we fly. We get penalized pretty good. So from our perspective, we like the improvements that they're making in staffing, but man, I mean, we've seen it more than anybody with pilots, and we know how to try to deal with that, and we need to make sure that now is the time when this pilot shortage is slowed down to just stock up and staff, and we've been doing that, and I think now that there's been a bit of a corner turn for FAA and ATC, they need to continue doing the same.
Who wants to weigh in?
I want to affirm something that Chip said a minute ago about technology and safety. Back in 2023, after we had a rash of near misses at the beginning of the year, Billy Nolan put together the safety review team. I served on that team. And we started out our work by looking at these 6 really very serious incidents that occurred at the beginning of the year. And I will tell you that not a single one of them resulted from a technology failure, and not a single one of them would have necessarily been ameliorated by technology improvements. They were all the result of lapses in procedures. Sometimes the procedures were caused by inadequate staffing. Sometimes they were caused by inadequate management. But most commonly, they occurred because of inadequate training. And so to Chip's point, unless we deal with the intangible elements of air traffic control, all the technology in the world will not produce the outcome that we want to see.
Yeah, let me chime in too on this. I couldn't agree with you more, David. You know, I spent in my previous life a lot of time at New York Trade Con, spending time at the facility, spending time with controllers, trying to understand what they were going through. And I can tell you that's a burden when it takes a toll. When you think about it, we're dealing with the delays, we're dealing with the slot substitutions, the smaller airplanes get delayed more than the main lines. That's just part of the industry, that's fine. But the toll it takes to show up in New York Trade Con every single day, Liberty Sector, for example, is one of the toughest ones up there. And see the faces, those folks are working their butts off. They're under a lot of stress. We've not only got to solve the number of people that we have, that's one element. And we not only have to provide better training, but we also have to make the environment that they work in better. We have to make their life better. We have to incentivize them to want to stay in those high, dense locations where the risk and stress is so high. And so it's really going to be a multiple aspect approach. It needs to be a cultural shift within the FAA. And, you know, again, we're all excited. You know, and we're sitting up here, we're talking about things that are our concern. I just want to echo, I think, what Tim said. We have the safest system in the world, and we are all happy about that. And you can tell by our presence up here how passionate we are and how much that's a fabric of our culture and how much we internalize safety. We do have the best system. There's a lot of things that are going to happen. I've had to deal with New York for decades. And I can tell you, I've been very pessimistic. This is the first time in a long time that I actually believe that there's political will, and I think it could be sustainable. I think this goes beyond the politics of left and right in this country. But we've got to do it from a really grassroots perspective. This won't sustain unless we want it to. And let your voices push for it, like ours are up here on the stage. But really, it's got to be something just more than just staffing numbers. It's got to be culture. It's got to be training. It's got to be leadership. And it's got to be incentivizing people to want to come to work every single day in that environment to be successful.
I think that's incredibly well said. And 2 things I think of is one, we do have this incredible uniformity in the industry for the first time, because when we've done this before, we've been very fractured. And everyone in the industry is speaking right now with one voice saying, you've got to modernize the system. And so far, that coalition has held. So I think that's going to be helpful. And the second thing with respect to recruiting, all of you have been no stranger to recruiting efforts. And I think that the FAA may need to change how it's reaching out to people and how people are learning. So what advice would you give? I'll start back at this end of the panel.
I'd like to hear from David. He actually knows how to lead those folks.
The most important change is one that Duffy is actually accelerating, which is the use of the enhanced CTI program. Keep in mind that we have the academy in Oklahoma City that has historically trained the bulk of our controllers. But there has evolved over the last, probably 10 or 15 years, the type of training program in universities that you would expect to find in any other professional area. And they're called, the College Training Initiative. And recently, when I say recently, 5 years ago, they started allowing these schools to train controllers so they can actually go directly into the facilities without having to pass through the academy, which is a place to learn all good, to lose all good technique. Duffy is, I think, this year, I think, has increased from 5, I think we've got 7 now online. We've got to continue expanding that because, again, it brings controllers directly into the facilities to begin their on-the-job training. And then the second thing I would say is really critical, and we all need to be pushing for this. The FAA trains their controllers using, again, the best technology of the 1980s. If we were using the simulator technology that the FAA has to train our flight crews, we would not have flight crews. And so in addition to recruiting, Brian has got to radically change and improve the training that occurs in the facilities because we've got to reduce the washout rate, which is running 30 to 40% in the facilities. It's still at this point.
Well, and you talked earlier about Acting Administrator Nolan's safety risk panel, and I was on the safety summit, and one of the things we talked about there was a focus on professionalism across the board, the use of urgency language and things like that, and that all tells, again, it's the and, it's not just more and more efficiently, but also safer and more professional. A question of how many on this panel serve airports that have contract towers? Okay, so I'll direct this question this way, but what are the issues like there? Are they a mirror, or are they vastly different in terms of staffing and technology?
Most of them are about 25% staff right now.
25%.
20 to 30% we've had to work.
Staff, not 25% down.
3
Okay.
out of 12 controllers are right to work with. It might be better now, but even just recently this summer, they were down. And so when we talk about just having tools, the people piece is huge. And it's not just, we've got to increase at the top of the funnel. Like, we've got to find ways to get people to come into this space. But I think using new technology, engaging with deep in not just in universities, we've got to get into high schools. We have to go way down to find these people. And for like Serco, we're talking to them all the time now, having these conversations. And Serco is one of the third-party providers, and they're doing everything they can. But it is tough to find people in some of these markets, and we've got to find ways to, again, top of the funnel, help people find ways to get them in. The tools, it's encouraging where we're going, and I think, I think Chip has said, there's simple things we can do that doesn't cost a lot of money, but another thing we can do is engagement with youth and people who help make this, remind people it's an incredible opportunity, great business. But how do we find that? We've done this with pilots, we've done this with maintenance technicians, we've got to now do this with controllers.
And I think you can do it more. I mean, we learned in all the staffing shortages that, when we got really desperate for, staffing, then the thing we would do is we would call it cast a wider net, try to get a bigger outreach. I don't think that's entirely effective. I think it's good to have a bigger outreach, but there's also some technologies and things you can utilize to screen people better, to know what they're about, ask the right questions, take them through the right process in the application process so that you can take the data on what the washout rate is and make sure that you can eliminate some of the unnecessary, very expensive recruiting stuff where you can target, this is the type of controller that we want, these are the type of schools we want to hire from. And so you really do also have to, in order to increase the numbers, be very, very efficient in how you are targeting the right type of people that you want. And once we made that turn, with pilots and mechanics, flight attendants, and those professionals, we've honed our systems into being a very efficient supply machine of the right type of people know we're not gonna wash out, they're gonna love this industry, and they're gonna be passionate about safety and that type of stuff. And that I think is extraordinarily helpful. But to Jason's point, I mean, the tower conversation is a different one, and there's a lot of improvements that can, I think, in some respects, very easily be enhanced as well.
So we talked a lot about the funding. We've got $12.5 billion. That's been well understood to be a down payment. It's our understanding that we're going to need more funding. We've already respected that it's a difficult climate to get funds, but we do have a pressing need, and unfortunately a tragedy that punctuated that need. So there's about $19 billion more estimated, at least perhaps, that is needed to make good. What do you think is the most important thing we being the FAA, but also the user community that supports the FAA in this, can do to ensure that that $12.5 billion down payment is well used and helps to set the stage for getting the rest of the funding that we need? I'll open it up for all.
Well, first, we need to make sure it gets spent, and it gets spent with results. You know, very often, you know, I mean, there's been a lot of investment in a lot of things over time. Next Gen had money, but we just missed targets, and we've got to find a way to push through the bureaucracy that causes that to happen. $12 billion is a great down payment. We need to actually spend those dollars every year, right? To get the authorization to spend those dollars every year. But they have to deliver on it. We need to do a better job of hitting targets and working through whether it's IT enhancements, whether it's the training enhancements, whether it's recruiting enhancements. That is a challenge, and especially in a government bureaucracy the size that it is.
I'll give you two things. First is all airspace users need to pay their fair share. Business aviation pays probably only 40% of the cost of actually delivering services to them. Space pays nothing. And AAM, as it comes online, is currently slated to pay nothing. And so the first step is we've got to increase the inflow by having everybody pay their fair share. The second thing we need to do is to take the FAA budget out of the discretionary portion of the federal budget. Because right now, every time there is a budget crunch, we get thrown in with housing and urban development and a whole bunch of other things that are immediate targets of people, and we have to fight for a share of the discretionary budget, as opposed to being in the mandatory side, where we get our money automatically, provided that the trust fund has got adequate funds. And so those two changes, I think, are the most important.
And there's a precedent for that, right?
There is, the harbor maintenance trust fund.
There's a lot of precedents out there, and by the way, I agree completely, David, with what you said. Those two things will fix it. But if you don't fix those two things, then you probably have spent $12 billion just replacing floppy disks with a cable somewhere, and that's it. Because that's really, I mean, we call it a modernization. It's a joke to call it a modernization. We're just getting rid of floppy disks with this money this time. I mean, the next one that's coming. But it also, to David's point, like I said, you need a consistent, long-range ability to fund this. And every time you go back to Congress, like David said, you're going to fight with other people, and it's going to get short-sighted relative to the technology. And if you don't spend, and I do agree with this, because we're all chartered companies and we see the cost, you have to spend all of it on the right stuff, because if you only spend 80% of it, you may not as well spend, a third of it. So the dynamics of how you invest in this technology, and when this came out, we were talking about spending these kind of dollars, and everybody was shocked at what the bill was. I was not shocked at the bill. I'm just shocked at how we're going to continue to get the rest of it, which is the question part here, is I'm just shocked how we're going to be able to make sure we spend all the money and have it properly funded. But David said it right. Make sure that the way that we get allocated is not competing with the interest of the federal government, and everybody, absolutely everybody, has to pay their fair share. And that's the biggest discrepancy. I can't believe who doesn't pay, and I can't believe who doesn't want to pay for what they get. It's crazy.
So I think all of us in the user community need to to sort of redefine what it means to keep an open mind, and that includes about the funding side. You also raise an interesting point that I don't think has been well surfaced, and it's critical, which is the importance of having technology that evolves, right? Because we all know that there were some chips that were approved in 2003, right? But by the time they were put in 2013, they were a decade old. So how important is that? And do you think are you optimistic that the technology we're looking at will evolve? You mentioned advanced air mobility, so many new users coming in space. How resilient is the technology going to be, and how can we avoid putting technology in that's just going to become redundant in the next couple of years? That's a tough question, but who wants to take it?
I'll take a swing at it. It is a tough one, right? If we could all figure out where technology is going, we would be maybe not in the airline industry. But I think it's especially hard for aviation, and it's especially hard for the government to have that forward look. And the reason I say it's hard for aviation is because of our rightful focus on safety. We are conservative in our use of technology as compared to Silicon Valley, as compared to other industries where we can't and we should not ever adopt the approach of move fast and break things. That's not how aviation works. We're the opposite, and we have to remain that. That said, I think trying to take the longer look that David and Chip and others have mentioned, understanding we're going to have funding and a pathway to do that is critical. I like how Chip characterized the $12.5 billion. It's not modernization, it's catch up. And it's catch up to not even today, probably it's catch up to 5 to 10 years ago. How do we unlock more value by saying, let's do that, let's keep that conservatism, let's use proven technology, but it has forward compatibility. And I think that's very doable. I think that the second hit, though, is government. And David knows a lot more about it than I do, for sure, but I do know that there are rules, complex rules on bidding process, on getting the lowest bidder, on favoring certain vendors and certain types of technologies. And that isn't always compatible with forward compatibility. So I think we have to make sure that we are taking a hard look at that.
That's my biggest concern about Brian's request for solutions. I think that in a number of those areas, we are just about to repeat the problems that we've had in the past. Take, for example, radar. The RFS contemplates all of our radars being replaced by the next presidential election. Guess what? That ain't going to happen. Well, what may happen is that all of them may be procured during this administration, so that when they are actually installed in the late 2030s, they will be a decade old. They will have decade-old technology. And so my concern is that we are repeating right now in a number of these areas the same problem that we brought upon ourselves with ERAM, which is what you were talking about. That when ERAM was finally installed, that's the center automation technology, when it was finally finished installation in 2014, it had chips that Lockheed Martin had bought in 2003. And that is the way that the government procures things, and I'm afraid that we're repeating that.
While you've raised the central automation platform, let's tuck into that. How will that help? Because that is something that's in the RFS. It's incredibly ambitious. I think you know very well. But can you provide context on why that's really critical?
Yeah, what she's referring to is something that's called the Common Automation Platform. Keep in mind right now that you've got Tracons and you've got centers. And they not only have completely different technology, they operate under different rules. There's a tremendous amount of inefficiency that occurs with the handoffs that occur between the centers and the Tracons. And so one of the initiatives that is in the RFS is beginning to look at a common automation platform. Now again, I think it's very wise. It's down as a TBD in terms of when it will actually get done. But it, among all the things that are in the RFS, it probably holds the greatest promise for actually increasing efficiency and capability. But it is a massive undertaking. And if we can do anything, just keep reminding the FAA over subsequent administrations, that this was started in 2025, and let's not lose focus on it, because it is a massive opportunity, but it's also a massive undertaking.
And I've heard you characterize it as one of the single most, one of the things that will get the single most improvement in efficiency.
Yes.
Bar none, because you don't have all these different systems talking to one another and handing off. I'm going to go just down the line. First of all, is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to add? So I'm going to go down the line and say you've got your elevator pitch to the FAA. We're going to send them the recording of this and say, what is the advice? What is the one thing that the FAA can do through this with the $12.5 billion that it has right now, or perhaps through some technologies that don't require a lot of funds, maybe it's just a change in a rule, that can deliver on a real safety improvement or a real safety and efficiency improvement. I'll start down with you, Timothy.
I would say, number one, solve staffing. We've all been there, and you can't, that dominates every conversation. If you don't have adequate staffing and you don't have the right funnel and the right pipeline, you're going to continue to hit upon that problem, and everything else is patchwork. So that's number one. Let's get that done. We can move quickly on that, and the money we have is adequate for that. Number two, invest, ruthlessly prioritize and invest in the highest ROI to the public. This piece I want to highlight. It's not to all of us. I would like for it to be to us, but it needs to be for the flying public, because they're the ones who hold the purse strings for the funding beyond the down payment.
I think it's simple for me, engage the industry. We can do this, we can figure this out. We now have the funds, it's encouraging, but we have to engage the industry in a structured way that we can use the funds, ruthlessly prioritize the funds in the right way, and think of it differently. Technology for us is not linear, because we have so many rules and regulations, and we just saw that. I mean, we have something we want to do, but by the time we get it, put it in place, it's already outdated. We've got to change and adapt. And when I talk about innovation at the center, it's really how do we create a linear, an ability to adapt linearly instead of in these big step changes. Because we get too far behind in between those moments, and now we're chasing our tails and wasting money.
I couldn't agree more. I think that, the number one thing that I would say to the FAA is don't work in isolation, and especially keep the regionals included, because we operate uniquely in so many parts of the country. How about you, Chip?
You know, I'm not close enough to it to say how they should spend the $12 billion. I know that I totally trust, their priorities and that type of stuff. I agree with them. Said make sure the ROI is to the flying public, not necessarily everyone who's yelling the loudest. I would go back and just say, for me, I've said it before, but the incident we had here in DC, there was technology there. There was really good technology there. I would go back and evaluate and evolve procedures relative to the dynamic evolution of how traveling is taking place today. And it's not just, I think that the Brian and the folks understand that, but it's the offices, it's the local people that have a very difficult time evolving and saying, hey, these towered airports, it's different, or these non-towered airports, it's different. We need to change some procedures and change some rules there. So from my perspective, the best ROI relative to how we fly our airplanes would be a significantly reevaluation and focus on those procedures and how that airspace is managed.
And you mentioned some of them very specifically.
Yeah.
Radios, requiring some radio communication.
Radios, transmitting, require it, or you lose your license.
Some of the things we've heard is maybe looking at how the VFR and IFR traffic is mixing in some places.
Yep.
And taking different steps to deconflict. So those are things, just harking back to your point, that they may not take money. It just may be a procedural change that can carry a big benefit.
That is for the benefit and ROI of the flying public, not necessarily private jet operators or the regional operators, but it's in the name of safety, it's by far the best answer.
Wonderful, thank you.
Stay the course. Brian and Sean are focused on the right things. They just need to stay focused. Don't get discouraged when you have a budget lapse, which you are going to have. Just pick up from where you left off, keep going, and keep in mind that Brian has committed to Senator Cruz to stay in his job into the next administration. And so Brian is going to be able to bring a durability of focus that we have not had in quite a long time. So stay the course.
Exactly right. Brian is doing a great job. He's got the great mindset. We know Brian personally. We know his passion for driving change. Brian's passion is going to face a massive government bureaucracy, as we all know. And that is going to be very difficult to stay the course with all the pressures that he's going to have to work and navigate through. But Brian, we're talking about ROI. Brian has also an ROI, and that's on the trust issue that they have to get back. So there are things that don't require 10 years to procure and implement. There are procedural changes like making sure GA is squawking in the West and on a radio frequency. There are things that Brian can do to start building that trust one bond single at a time. And those things have to happen, and it should happen quickly so that he can get some momentum, because the trust he builds is not just with us and the public, it's also with members of Congress and the bureaucracy that can tip or change his path. But Brian needs to get those big wins, and we need to support him and Secretary Duffy in any way we can, collectively, and all the folks here in the audience today, ensure that continues to happen and stay the course as David so eloquently stated.
That's very well said, and that brings to mind, right after Administrator Bedford was confirmed, he spoke at a conference, and one of the first things he said is that he was trying to de-silo the agency. And so I'll add to your point about winning back trust is it's not just the Congress and the flying public, but trust within the FAA. And I think he is taking those steps. I think that's why the President wanted somebody from business with a history of being a transformational leader. And I think he's going to have a lot of support from all of us. Well, that is a wonderful piece on which to close. I think we'll be continuing to talk about this topic this week and beyond. And the good news is that the FAA and the Congress are not working in isolation. They've solicited our feedback. We're continuing to give it, and we really appreciate this panel for sharing your expertise and helping us more effective when we talk to these policymakers. So please join me in a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. Okay, we've got to bring your own podium here. Okay, you got it? I got it. Thank you.